Hello, and welcome to the Keep It Local Maine podcast, where we tell the stories of local business owners, artists, and entrepreneurs, and learn more about what they do, who and what inspires them, their challenges, successes, and more. My name is Todd Regalinski.
And I am Kimberly Regalinski.
And we are the publishers of Keep It Local Maine, a magazine that helps to showcase local businesses to the people in and around their communities. Thank you for tuning in to our weekly podcast that you can subscribe to on most streaming services such as Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Google Podcasts, and others. You can learn more about us at keepitlocalmaine.com and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube through the links in the show notes. In this episode, we'll be talking with Maine designer Alice Yardley. Alice is a contemporary handbag designer based in Portland, Maine. While working as a high school art teacher for about 8 years in Atlanta and New York City, she developed her love for leatherworking, color theory, and design. When starting her company in 2018, Alice used her relationships with local upholstery and leather shops to repurpose leather pieces into unique bags. A portion of her work continues to be made with repurposed leather, and she's extremely passionate about it, contributing to the sustainable and zero-waste movement in the world of fashion. Each handbag is thoughtfully created into a one-of-a-kind design handmade by Alice herself in her studio/shop in the Washington Avenue black box shipping containers. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. Weather is getting warmer and it's project planning season, which means you should call Maine Commercial Contracting, your locally owned choice for residential and commercial services in southern Maine. They'll be there for that new driveway, walkway, or excavation for your home and for your business with parking lot paving, road milling, heavy hauling, and competitive commercial pricing. So when you need your project done right and on your timeline, get a hold of the company with the appetite for excellence and the skills to see it through. Call Maine Commercial Contracting at 207-391-0540 for a free estimate or find them online at mainecommercialcontracting.com.
Welcome to the show, Alice. We are so glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I am so excited about this podcast because we get to talk about really nice accessories. And I was, anytime we get to do that, I'm excited. So tell us.
Wait a minute. How come you're not saying that I'm excited? Are you trying to say that I'm like anti-accessory?
Well, you know.
Because I'm not.
Okay.
I'm pro-accessory.
Okay.
I just don't think we have the same accessories in mind.
Yeah.
Bags are for men too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you were an art teacher for 8 years before you became a designer. What sparked that and how did you navigate that transition?
Yeah, I was an art teacher for a really long time. I actually was a math teacher before that for a couple of years too. So I became a math teacher right out of college at 21, 22 through Teach for America. Mm-hmm. Just because I didn't really know what I wanted to do out of college. I had an art history degree, and unlike all my friends with business degrees, I didn't have a logical next step and companies coming to recruit me and stuff like that. So I went to an interview with Teach for America and really kind of fell in love with their pitch and everything that they brought to the table and their motto that all children should have access to a quality education and mm-hmm. closing the achievement gap and things like that. So it was really inspiring for me. So I thought, okay, it's just a 2-year commitment. So they placed me teaching 8th grade math in Atlanta. So I did that for 2 years and then thought, I'm probably going to want to do something in the arts since that's what my degree was in. So mm-hmm. I applied to a high school in the Bronx and I started an art department there. Oh, wow. So I kind of planned all the courses and also was the only art teacher. So I taught every one of those courses too. So I taught art history and 2 AP classes and studio art and public art and fashion, everything. Wow. So, I kind of transitioned out of that a couple years before COVID and moved back here and really just felt like it's kind of tough. I feel like people think that being an art teacher is the most creative job you could have. But when you're planning every single day for anticipating every mistake that a student could make or, making sure that everything is as clean as possible and the materials that they're using don't get everywhere, it's just really, it's a lot more of a type A kind of job than a creative job, and I wasn't really able to be creative, but my students were. So I really wanted to find something to embrace my own creativity again.
So what made you decide to go into designing accessories? Like, did a light bulb just go on one day and say, this is what I want to do? What sparked that?
So I always kind of did it and was always kind of into sewing, but I did it as a hobby in my last 2 years of teaching, and especially during the summers when we had a month off or so. And I started doing it for my friends and for myself. And then like everyone really liked it. So I started a website that was just kind of a way for me to step away from my teacher role, which was kind of all consuming, and do something that I really, really enjoyed. So when I stopped teaching, I was moving back to Maine, and I had a couple months before I moved. And I just thought, what better time to try this? And then if I don't like it, or it fails, or something goes wrong, or something, I can change things, and I have time before I have to apply for jobs. But then COVID hit. So it was really my only option at that point. So it was actually really interesting timing to move back here, but I think it all happened for a reason, for sure.
Wow. So I want to go back to the math piece, the math teacher piece.
Yeah.
Being a math teacher, that must have, utilizing that skill must have had, or did it have, an advantage when it came to design?
I think I did. I really was placed teaching math and hadn't taken, a calculus class since I was in high school, and had to kind of reteach myself all of that. So when I was assigned to teach math, I really utilized the art portion and was really trying to bring art into my math classroom with like Leonardo da Vinci and all sorts of different Renaissance artists, and even bringing like some science in, just because I think that it really makes it it's a more holistic approach to education, but I definitely utilize it for everything I do now, especially kind of at a really, really basic level. But one of the collections that I did for New York Fashion Week was based on geometry. So it's really fun to play with, especially when I'm creating my own templates and my own designs. I'm really literally cutting and pasting pieces of paper around and measuring, and sometimes doing all of these, math problems in my head. So it's kind of cool to utilize that part of what I've done in my past.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's going back to it's a starting an art program, which it's one of those things I don't think of somebody like, oh, somebody started this art program. Right. I just think of, well, there's always been an art program here, right?
Not for a lot of schools, I think.
True. I guess I've just been lucky enough to be in schools that always have that.
Yeah.
What kind of came first? Did you feel like you had the planning skills already, that was kind of part of your personality or your skill set, or do you feel like you developed some skills through developing that program that then kind of come into play with what you do now and running your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a really big parallel between not even starting the art program, but even just being a teacher at all through Teach for America and what I do now, because I really am, in every job that I've ever had, I am 100% self-taught. So, with Teach for America, you do a kind of intensive program to learn essentially all of the things that you would learn if you got a master's degree in education, but you learn it all within the span of a couple of months. And then they really just throw you into the classroom and you learn by doing. And so I kind of took that with me when I started this art department too. And, sky's the limit for what you want to dream. And if people shut it down, they shut it down, and you kind of learn to adapt. And then it's kind of the same thing with what I'm doing now. I was never I never was formally taught how to sew or how to make or how to design. And I've never really taken any classes for anything like that. It's all been things that I have just wanted to do. And I just set my mind to it, and I just kind of go.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And as someone who has been self-taught in design, graphic design, print layout, and even in audio and editing and things like that, I can truly appreciate that. And I find myself nodding along when you're just like, you just kind of get the basics and then just dive in. And well, you better start. If you don't know how to swim yet, you better learn real quick.
Yeah, exactly. But it's totally it kind of means more when you have success. Then I think it's more exciting because it's something that you didn't know that you could do. And it makes you think like, oh, I really could do anything I wanted. So
that's
cool.
So true.
Yeah, it is kind of eye-opening. Like, oh wow, at some point somebody had to be the first person to do this. And kind of figured this out on their own. Okay, now what's to stop me from figuring out other things? And it is a really cool thing. It's very empowering, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So from reading your bio and your website, it's really easy to see that sustainability is important to you on a personal level. How does that factor into your designs and your business as a whole?
Yeah, so I think, in some ways, it's much more difficult for my business to be a sustainable business. And in some ways, it's much easier. And I think originally it just started out of necessity because I'd been living in New York and paying, ridiculous rent prices and getting a relatively small salary. So I really just started playing around with remnant leather and repurposed leather as a hobby because I had to and couldn't afford, walking into Mood and getting, hundreds of dollars worth of real leather. So it kind of started as a necessity, but I was really able to appreciate it and streamline it when I moved back here and started the company. But I think in some ways it's difficult because, something as simple as finding enough materials, like that's a pretty difficult thing to do, especially now that my business is growing. And then, custom orders can be really difficult because people want specific colors or specific textures and patterns. And I'm basically on a big leather scavenger hunt for my life. That's what I feel like. So it's definitely difficult. It's difficult. It makes having an online site a little bit harder just because, you really have to photograph every single angle and every single thing that you make because there might be a scratch in the leather somewhere or, you really need to show it under a couple different kinds of light and stuff like that. So it's really hard to it's hard to make duplicates. Like every single thing that I add to my site is one of a kind. So in some ways that's really difficult, but in a lot of ways it's made my business easier and also I think more successful because the materials are relatively inexpensive and even sometimes free. And I'm able to keep prices down for me, and therefore I can keep the prices down for my customers. So a lot of times people come into the shop and they're just shocked that a real leather bag is as inexpensive as it is. And I really like being able to bring that to a larger clientele. It also expands clientele because a lot of shoppers who usually shop for vegan leather bags for ethical reasons and environmental reasons don't want to purchase a leather bag. And a lot of times this is kind of a perfect, best of both worlds because they're able to get a real leather bag and know that they're not having to compromise their values for it. And it just it really forces me to be creative with what I have. So I try to have as little waste as possible in the fashion industry being one of the most wasteful industries. I really want to try to have little to zero waste. And so it really makes me have to use every single little piece of leather that I have. And, I come up with new designs in ways to use those small pieces. So
I love
it's
that.
it's helpful to me too. I think sustainability is more than just saying, oh, yay, it's great for the environment. It's also just a successful economic and business model. And it reaches more people and provides people to really think about your product.
Yeah, for sure. I love the fact that it's one of a kind.
Yeah.
You're getting something that nobody else has. And that's so cool. It makes it really special
Yeah, but what I think is great, because I mean, I love stuff that's kind of one of a kind, or you're like, oh, this is just, not everybody can go to whatever store and get this exact same thing. Like, you've got something that either you only have or very few people have, and there is just something kind of cool about that. But I had not thought about the actual logistical challenges of,
my gosh.
Now I got to make sure I have every angle photographed. It's under not just good light, but really, really good light, because you don't want somebody to not see those things and then be upset when they get it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a whole nother side.
But then also just I love how you can go from that whole, like, hey, it's really cool because it's one of a kind, but there's also a lot of work. But then you kind of pull that back up with a mindset of, but there's all these other benefits too. And it's just such a great way of thinking about it.
Really is. It's
I mean,
great model.
think like a lot of businesses in the fashion industry are kind of shifting their mindset that way because they have to, because all of these studies have come out that don't look so good for that industry. So I think if you're starting a company on the basis of that, you really don't have to sacrifice what you're doing or make these huge changes to a company. You can really grow. There's only one way to go, and that's up. So
that's
pretty
true.
Cool.
So this is exciting. So you recently had your handbags featured in New York Fashion Week. How exciting was that? And what was that whole experience like? I mean, as starting this from the ground up to have that moment, that must have been like incredible.
Yeah, it was the most incredible experience of my professional life. I mean, yeah, I think being a small business, you really have to learn to advocate for yourself and for your product. So I was constantly searching for opportunities and applying for things that just, I mean, at the time kind of seemed ridiculous, but, I would reach out to magazines and see who could promote me or my product or anything. And I happened to see just via Instagram a company called Flying Solo, which is an organization of independent designers, small independent designers who support your small brand under their larger brand. And you can choose how you want to use their resources. So they have 2 store locations in New York, so you could wholesale your products in their store, participating in Fashion Week. They have a lot of PR opportunities, and they do a lot of styling for magazines and shoots. So I decided to go the Fashion Week route, as I think a lot of other people would want to do. It just seemed like a really cool opportunity. So I was accepted, and when I applied, I had to present a collection of about 24 handbags, and they were all made from really bright suede and created, using like the geometry that I talked about earlier, really interesting shapes and color block combinations. I just had so much fun with it. And when they accept you, they pair you with, as an accessories designer, they pair you with some clothing designers. And then when you arrive for styling day, you work directly with those designers to style the looks on the models. And you're really like in every aspect of putting everything together and planning for the actual show. So you have a hand in styling and what looks good on the models, and you have a hand in kind of how you want your product to appear. And so I was actually originally only paired with 2 designers, but a third designer came up to me on the styling day and wanted to use my bags for her collection. And so it was really cool. I ended up being the only designer who was in 3 of the 4 fashion shows, which was incredible. And it was also just cool because 2 of the shows were couture and 1 was ready to wear. And so it was it's just interesting to see how a handbag in this, a one collection of handbags can really be paired with something that's as casual as like jeans and a cashmere sweater, and also this sort of extreme couture gown that looks more like art than it does fashion or than it does clothing. So I think it's just really it was a cool opportunity for me because I was like, oh my gosh, my bags really work with a variety of of looks and a variety of styles. And it was just so cool. And it was really cool to go through the process of, there was a red carpet and press, interviews, so many influencers and people coming up to you and photographers and wanting to work with you. And it was really, really cool. Plus you got to see what everyone else was making. And I think the timing couldn't have been more perfect since it was the first ever pandemic fashion show. So I think I was accepted, it must have been like right after the pandemic in the spring. And then the fashion show was in September of 2020. So, I mean, there was a time period where I was pretty nervous it wasn't going to happen. But I mean, we were all really locked in our houses at that point still.
Right.
And I didn't have a store yet or a studio yet. So I was really just working from my apartment and I didn't have anything else to do. So I was like, I'm going to make this collection.
That's
so
amazing.
I kind of, I did it all at once and it was really fun. And I just totally immersed myself in that. And it was just incredible to see it on the runway. It was like a dream come true.
I bet.
All right. I don't know why I just raised my hand. Maybe it's because I'm talking to a former teacher and maybe probably because I'm also going to ask a really dumb question right now, but I think I'm not the only person. I have heard the word couture many times. I have no idea what it means.
So it means handmade, technically.
Okay.
But I mean, nowadays, it's not everything is like actually handmade on it. But a lot of times when you see a couture beaded gown or something on a red carpet or that, Beyonce is wearing, a lot of times people have individually stitched the beading on it and, everything is fitted perfectly and done by hand and usually done directly by the designer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is that closer to like bespoke? Because I don't even know what that means either. So
yeah, they're very, very similar. A lot of times now in the fashion industry, though, couture has really shifted its meaning to a little bit more similar to avant-garde. So something that's just, when you're watching a fashion show and, when I was accepted to Fashion Week, I think I was showing some of the previous videos to my dad and he was just kind of like, what? No one would ever wear that. That's ridiculous. You don't see people walking down, the street wearing something that looks like that. And I'm like, that's not the point. So I think nowadays couture really does kind of link more to avant-garde, even though they have very different meanings. So.
Yeah.
I just want to note that after 75 episodes here, I finally pulled out a word that has to do with fashion that Kim gave me a confused look on.
Yeah.
Hey.
I said bespoke, and she kind of gave me this look like, what?
Okay. Yeah.
I'm proud.
That's 10 points for you, honey.
I'm still way behind in fashion points, but I'm going to hang on to that one for a long time.
That's great.
So what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in starting your own business?
Oh, I think it's determining just next steps. And I definitely feel like I'm still in the middle of those challenges, to be honest. I feel like I probably always will be. But it's just kind of trying to find a balance between challenging myself and challenging my brand without overwhelming myself.
Mm-hmm.
And right now that's really for just like how to expand. How to expand my brand, how to expand my number of products that I have, how to expand just in terms of my retail space, everything. And it's tough because I have always had a lot of control over everything that I've done. And it's really tough to think about expanding and, you don't want to lose the intimacy and the factors of your business that are so special and unique. Mm-hmm. And right now in, my small shipping container store, I have a studio in the back and a retail space in the front. And people just get so excited to see me actually working in there. And so when I think about growing and think about losing that aspect if I hired somebody, or, you know, however you could expand. It's tough to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think like that's definitely part of growing. And some of that is me needing to change my mindset a little bit, but I do think it's really special to be the only person who's making these products, and people can see and they know exactly where it comes from. Everything is very clear, and there's no questions about, well, was this really made here, or was this actually made in a factory? You know, like it's very clear. You see me making everything. People can pick out their own materials. They can look at the sewing machine that actually made it. So I think that's really right now the biggest challenge, and probably has always been just every step in how to expand and when to expand.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
So,
yeah.
And
it is.
It is, I think, for most people. I mean, most entrepreneurs.
Yeah, those questions don't stop.
Yeah, they really don't.
No. And that is kind of cool. I like how the way you describe your workspace and retail space, and how they're kind of they're really sort of one. It's sort of like an open kitchen at a restaurant.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Yeah.
Which I always think is cool, you know, even though I don't even know half of what's going on back there, but I just I love it, you know.
Yeah, people get so interested. I mean, they're also just really interested by the space, the fact that it's an old shipping container. So a lot of times, you know, it brings people in, and it's just a really cool idea. And yeah, people, they get excited when they come in. So, and that's what I want. I want to see them happy, and think that even if they don't buy anything, think that just the experience of walking in was really cool. And, you know, that was always kind of my dream, to have a studio space and retail space that were one and the same. And I actually pitched the idea to the black boxes where my store is located when I was still living in Brooklyn. So this was, you know, a couple years before the pandemic, and I hadn't even moved back here yet. I was just kind of like, this is my dream. So I'm just going to reach out to people and see what the situation is. And obviously there was a wait list for that space, but it just happened to be open when I needed it to be. So that was pretty cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, what advice would you give to young designers and entrepreneurs who are just getting started? If there's one piece of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it would definitely be to make connections and to advocate for yourself. So, I mean, I think that everyone wants to help everyone else. And I think it's just really important that you reach out to people when you need help, reach out to people to get publicity, reach out to people to collaborate, and even people who are in a completely different field than you're in. It's really interesting to hear their perspective on what you're doing and your business, and I'm sure vice versa. So it's nice because it opens up your business to really all the directions that you could possibly go. So I think like if I hadn't have done that, I probably wouldn't ever have tried New York Fashion Week and going kind of the high fashion route. I wouldn't have, you know, I've tried markets and doing the makers markets and artisan fleas in Brooklyn. So going that kind of route and reaching out to people who've done that, and trying retail and reaching out to, you know, retailers and wholesaling. And you kind of just have to like reach out to a bunch of people and make connections, and to continue those connections as much as possible, because people really do want to help each other.
Right.
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wider net you cast, the more likely you are to catch something that's good, right?
Yeah. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you know that it doesn't work, so you're not constantly thinking about it being a possibility. You're kind of like, all right, I tried that. I know that I didn't really like it, or it wasn't effective, or I tried to do an artist collaboration and maybe that, you know, there were issues with that or something, or, oh, I tried to go this route and change, you know, my customer base in this way. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you're not constantly thinking about what if.
Yeah. It's you can at least cross that off the list.
Yeah.
For sure.
So one of the questions that we always enjoy asking, because the answers are always very interesting and varied, is how do you define success, whether it be personally, professionally, artistically, or even all three?
Yeah, I think for all three, I would say that it's just waking up every day and feeling happy. I think it's just still feeling so excited and inspired to do what I do. And even if, I have a day where I don't sell anything, or I have a day where, I messed up something and I get really frustrated, or even if it's personally, I think just realizing the good in what you've done and how far you've come, but it's just feeling like excited to keep going and not give up.
Yeah.
So just being happy, really.
Yeah, that is,
simple as that sounds.
If you can wake up and you're not gritting your teeth going to work or whatever is going to help you put food on the table, that is a huge bucket of win right there.
Yeah, that is a win,
I think that's part of why I knew I had to take at least a break from teaching, just because it was really just mentally and emotionally exhausting. And so, when I started doing this, it was, even if I had just done it as a hobby and hadn't expanded it to be a business, it made me so happy. So I knew I wanted to keep doing it.
So we are inspiration junkies. So another question that we always like to ask, because there's so many different answers, is who or what inspires you?
Okay. So for my business and the art that I create and fashion, I would definitely say the materials, because if I'm not inspired by the materials that I get, I won't be able to try new things. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of more by force, but I get so excited. And then I think for business too, just kind of style icons and trends. And I'm kind of a fashion junkie and really into art history and color and everything like that. But I think for just personally, my family, they're insanely supportive and they just inspire me to be the best version of myself. And if I want to do something, even if I'm really scared, they're just so supportive and make everything so easy for me. So I wouldn't be where I am without them.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. That is so
nice
important.
To have that. Yeah, it's so important to have that.
Yeah. Well, Alice, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and talking with us and sharing a lot. I think that is going to be there's going to be a lot to chew on for our listeners, and a lot of interesting tidbits, a lot of fun, and also a lot of things to think about for entrepreneurs and artists and designers and just in general. So thank you so much.
Yes,
I'll make sure that
much.
In our show notes we have a link to your website, which also people can go to your shop on the website.
Yep.
I'll also have information on where you're located it's Portland, correct?
Yep, it's on Washington Ave in Portland.
Okay, I thought, and then I lost confidence right as I was about to say it, and I thought, you know what, I'll say that, and then oh no, it's here. Oh, okay, but I'll make sure I have a link to the website, your location, and also social media pages and all of that. And we wish you great success in 2022.
Yes, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Once again, we'd like to thank our sponsor and encourage you to check them out through the link in the show notes. And thank you again for listening.